Ever catch yourself wondering why some societies just seem to thrive while others, they crumble? It feels like one of those massive questions with no easy answer, right?
Yeah, it does.
But what if I told you that the key to understanding all of this could lie in something incredibly fundamental, almost like the energy that makes everything go?
That's a pretty great way to tee up our conversation today. We're going to be doing a deep dive into an energy theory that aims to explain this whole roller coaster of societal stability and collapse.
Right.
For this analysis, you've shared some fascinating source material.
Yes.
Audio excerpts of someone who seems to have spent their lifetime studying ideologies and developing this theory, and some text excerpts that lay out the core equation and its wider implications.
Exactly. And our mission today is to kind of dust off this energy theory and see how it offers a really unique perspective on how societies function and the challenges they face.
Yeah.
And it all starts with an equation that at first glance seems pretty simple. VE equals HY. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. What do all these letters actually stand for?
So at the heart of this theory, as you mentioned, is this equation VE equals HY.
Okay.
And each letter represents a vital piece of the puzzle of societal dynamics.
Okay.
So we've got V, which stands for productividad, or productivity, which can be understood as a society's ability to produce things, whether those are goods, services, or even well-being.
Okay.
And this productivity, in turn, stems from intelligence, or intelligentsia,
Okay.
which can either be human intelligence, our labor,
Right.
or artificial intelligence, or capital.
Right.
Some sources even simplify this by saying that V represents the combination of material resources plus human resources.
Okay. Interesting.
Then we have E, which stands for fontes de energie, or energy sources, but in a very broad sense, encompassing everything from biomass, geothermal, wind, solar, biofuels, human labor itself as a form of energy, hydroelectric, nuclear, even a mention of the potential electromagnetic energy of the Earth's field.
Wow.
H is pretty straightforward,
Okay.
populaso, or population.
Okay.
And finally, Y symbolizes conflito distributivo, or distributive conflict, which is sometimes referred to as the distributive equation, or distribución de recursos, or resource distribution. Think of it as the aggregate macroeconomic outcome, everything that's invested or consumed in an economic cycle, basically GDP.
So if I'm getting this right, this equation kind of suggests that there needs to be this crucial balance between what a society can produce, driven by its intelligence and the energy sources it has available.
Exactly.
And the needs and the potential conflicts that arise from how many people are in that society and how the resources are divided up between them, right? It's almost like a recipe for societal stability.
Absolutely. The theory suggests that a society's sustainability hinges on this delicate dance between its ability to generate these products, whether tangible or intangible, and the way those products are distributed among its population in a way that avoids excessive distributive conflict that could destabilize the whole system.
Speaking of energy, one thing that really stood out to me is that in this theory, energy isn't just the electricity we use in our homes. It's a much broader concept, almost like the fundamental force behind any transformation, any creation of something.
Exactly. Energy here is understood as this universal principle driving every single transformation and creation of what we call things, as was highlighted in one of the audio excerpts he shared. And a key concept tied to this idea of energy is what's called net energetic, or net energy.
Okay.
Which is basically the energy that we can extract from a source minus the energy that we invested to get that energy. This balance, this leftover energy, is fundamental in evaluating whether an energy source is actually viable in the long run.
And this is where things get really interesting. The connection between having available energy sources and a nation's power is super clear when you look at the example of China and their focus on coal, right?
Yeah.
A strategic decision to secure an abundant source of energy, at least for a while.
Yeah, the availability and choice of energy sources is directly tied to a nation's wealth and power. And China, in prioritizing coal, has demonstrated a strategy to ensure an energy base for its growth. But a crucial point here that the sources bring up is that we might actually be living in an era of declining net energy when it comes to certain sources like biofuels. And this, if we couple this with a growing global population, could lead to even more intense competition for resources. It's like we have more and more people needing a slice of a pie that isn't growing at the same rate.
And this prospect of a future where digital humans and artificial intelligence are playing a larger role, That kind of throws the whole energy game into a whole different ballpark, right?
Yeah.
How does that factor in?
The emergence of digital humans, this idea of increasingly integrated digital lives, and the rise of artificial intelligence really signal a radical shift in the primary sources of energy and how it will be distributed. The very definition of productivity V is undergoing a transformation, with artificial intelligence taking a more central role.
That brings you to V productivity. The audio source mentioned this historical shift from human intelligence being the primary driver of productivity to a future where artificial intelligence may dominate. What are the major implications of this shift?
Well, historically, human intelligence has been the main driving force behind productivity.
Right.
But with the advance of artificial intelligence and capital, understood here as financial and technological resources,
Okay.
there is this tendency for this balance to be reversed.
I see.
And one of the most worrying consequences of this shift is the potential devaluation of human labor in a model that is purely driven by capital and AI.
Wow.
The audio source raises a crucial question.
Okay.
In such a scenario, will there be enough resources left to sustain a large human population? It's not just about jobs disappearing, but about a fundamental redefinition of the value of human contribution to society.
That's a huge question to be grappling with.
Yeah.
And then we get to why the distributive conflict.
Yeah,
This variable seems to be the thermometer of societal stability,
exactly.
measuring whether how resources are divided in society actually meets the needs of the population in a way that avoids major tension and extreme inequalities.
Exactly. Why encompasses everything from what each of us consumes and invests to how resources are allocated in all kinds of budgets, our households, companies, governments.
Right.
A stable society, according to this theory, is one where this allocation of resources manages to satisfy the needs of the population in a way that minimizes conflict and dissatisfaction.
Okay.
This includes access to quality education, healthcare, cultural opportunities, a dignified retirement, for example. Think of Y as the slice of the pie that each person receives.
I like that.
If some slices are gigantic and others are practically non-existent, the likelihood of conflict increases.
Right.
Yeah,
And extreme wealth inequality is pointed out as a major driver of instability.
exactly.
And the lack of meeting basic needs can lead to all sorts of problems, from urban violence to wars between countries, for resources always linked back to the energy question, right?
Right.
It's like a lack of a fair piece of the pie leads to a brawl in the kitchen.
Exactly. The excessive concentration of wealth in a small segment of the population is seen as a potential trigger for instability and conflict. Likewise, if a significant portion of the population doesn't have their basic needs met, this can lead to social unrest, violence, and ultimately conflicts between nations over energy resources.
Right.
It's important to remember that even in systems that appear more egalitarian, there can be hierarchies and an unequal distribution of resources, albeit in more subtle forms.
So how do all these pieces fit together? How can an imbalance in this VE equals HY equation lead to a societal collapse?
Yeah.
The sources you shared mention parallels with ancient civilizations like the Mayans, the Incas, the Roman Empire. What can we learn from those examples through the lens of this theory?
An imbalance in the VE equals HY equation is seen as one of the fundamental causes for the disappearance of civilizations throughout history.
Okay.
If there isn't enough energy available to sustain the productivity needed to meet the needs of a growing population and its demands for a fair distribution of resources, this can lead to society disintegration. Interestingly, the theory points out that while human societies may collapse due to these energy imbalances, knowledge and technology represented by intelligence and capital V
Right.
tend to persist and be absorbed by other cultures. It's like the recipe for the cake survives even after the baker is gone.
So where does democracy fit into this whole equation?
Yeah.
One of the sources you mentioned states that democracy only exists in energized civilizations.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold statement. Why would energy be such a fundamental prerequisite for a democratic system?
Yes, this statement that democracy only exists in energized civilizations really emphasizes the strong link between the availability of energy, a society's productive capacity, and the maintenance of a robust civil society. In other words, a society that has sufficient energy and productivity to ensure a certain level of well-being for the majority of its population is more likely to sustain a political system where people have a voice and decision-making power. The danger arises when there's a decline in productivity combined with restricted access to energy sources.
Right.
This can lead to an overall decline in wealth and potentially the weakening or even the end of democracy as the struggle for resources intensifies.
The audio source seems to offer a pretty strong critique of current ideological debate debates,
Yes.
suggesting that they often fail to grasp this underlying energy dynamic. There's also a concern with the excessive focus on capital and a certain devaluation of human well-being in favor of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
The perspective put forward is that many of the ideological debates we see today end up overlooking these fundamental energy principles that shape how societies function.
Right.
There's a critique of a view that prioritizes the accumulation of capital and the pursuit of material possessions above all else, often to the detriment of the population's well-being.
Okay.
And there is this concern with an excessive reliance on artificial intelligence, which could end up marginalizing a significant portion of the human population
Right.
if there isn't helpful planning about how resources will be distributed in this new scenario.
And this idea of extermination movements in an AI-dominated future is pretty dark stuff.
Yeah.
Does that stem from this potential lack of resources for a large human population if energy distribution primarily favors artificial intelligence? How does the theory envision such an extreme scenario?
This is, without a doubt, one of the most alarming projections that emerges from this line of thinking. If in a future where artificial intelligence plays a central role in productivity, the distribution of energy and other resources leaves a significant portion of the human population without what's needed to survive with dignity, the theory raises the possibility of movements emerging that advocate population reduction as a kind of solution to the problem of scarcity.
Wow.
The audio source suggests that this could manifest in various ways, from more or less explicit policies to increased vulnerability to events like pandemics or conflicts.
The source also mentioned those crazy patriots
Yeah.
who end up inverting concepts and promoting empty slogans, contrasting this with a more genuine patriotism focused on defending the nation and its people. And the example of predatory tourism really illustrates how an uncontrolled excess of population H can overwhelm local resources without bringing real development, reinforcing this need for balance in the equation.
Yes, there's a sharp critique of those who call themselves patriots, but whose actions end up harming the interests of the nation and its own people.
Right.
The example of predatory tourism is quite illustrative. An uncontrolled growth in the number of tourists in a given area without a counterpart in terms of investment in infrastructure sanitation, or where generating real benefits for the local community can lead to environmental degradation and depletion of resources, negatively impacting the quality of life for residents. This reinforces the idea that the size of the population H needs to be in balance with the productive capacity V and the available energy resources E to ensure a fair distribution Y and long-term sustainability.
As we wrap up our deep dive, the text you shared reminds us of our intrinsic connection to the planet, the fragility of Earth when viewed from space, and how our most basic instincts don't always align with the needs of complex societies.
Yeah.
Energy is truly the currency of life, and our dependence on fossil fuels has brought undeniable progress, but also placed us in the face of some huge environmental challenges.
This reflection on our relationship with the planet is fundamental. It reminds us of our interdependence with all living beings and the finite nature of Earth's natural resources. Our journey powered by fossil fuels has brought us technological advancements and a certain level of comfort, but it has also confronted us with urgent environmental problems like climate change and ecosystem degradation.
Right.
The need to rethink our relationship with energy, seeking a transition to a low-carbon economy, and reevaluating our consumption patterns is crucial to ensuring a more sustainable future for generations to come. The key may lie in our capacity for adaptation cooperation and making conscious decisions that benefit both humanity and the planet.
So for those of you who joined us on this energy journey, here's a final thought-provoking question. How does this VE equals HY equation change your perspective on the challenges we face today and the choices we need to make as a society? Think about the balance between productivity, our energy consumption, the needs of the population, and how resources are distributed in your own life, your community, and the world. Understanding these fundamental dynamics is undoubtedly an important step in navigating the complexities of the future.
Reflecting on this intricate relationship between the energy we use, the productivity we generate, the needs of the population, and how resources are distributed invites us to a deeper analysis of the forces shaping our society. By internalizing these principles, we can become more aware of our choices and contribute to building a more stable and equitable future.
To wrap up our conversation, the main takeaway from our deep dive is that this energy theory, with its VE equals HY equation, offers us a powerful and surprisingly simple lens for understanding societal stability and the critical interplay between productivity, energy, resources, population, and the distribution of those resources. We hope this analysis has been a valuable shortcut for you to be well informed on such a fundamental topic.
Absolutely. The ability to bring together this diverse information and extract this unified perspective on social dynamics demonstrates the value of delving deep into these complex issues.
Right.
We hope that you, our listener, will take this new understanding and apply it to your analysis of the world around you, always seeking balance in this vital equation.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.